So my name's Sarah Haskett, and I'm chairing this event on behalf of the Good Mental Health Cooperative. And we're delighted to be hosting this event to introduce to you our new project, Solent Connections. And we've invited a couple of speakers to share information with you about the issues facing people looking after loved ones because of illness, disability, or emotional distress, and also information about a range of support services available. So now, before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to share with you a few words about the Good Mental Health Cooperative and our project, Solent Connections. The Good Mental Health Cooperative is an established social enterprise based in Portsmouth. We're a collaborative network of individuals, groups, enterprises developing initiative and innovative approaches that promote good mental health. Our vision is to contribute to a society which values mental and emotional health, just as we do our physical health. Here are some of the key reasons why we've set up our new support initiative, Solent Connections. The project's backed by Solent NHS Trust for the next year. And as a virtual project, we can be flexible about geographical boundaries, but our main focus is on Portsmouth and the southeast of Hampshire, meaning Havant, Fareham, Gosport, which is where our main links are with other agencies and our community resources are at its strongest. So nationally, it's thought that 4.5 million people, million additional people have been taking on the caring for an older or disabled or seriously ill relatives or friends since COVID-19 pandemic started. That's a big number. Many others who were already looking after somebody else found that their outside support that they had previously disappeared suddenly a year ago when the first lockdown started. So what do we mean by unpaid carer? An unpaid carer is anyone, including children and adults, who look after a family member, partner, or friend who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem, or an addiction, and cannot cope without their support. And who are these unpaid carers? Well, we'd have to say that the vast majority are women, not all, of course. But if we look at social and economic expectations in families and households, it is often women who are expected and often feel more responsible themselves for the care and support of a loved one. Most likely, they wouldn't even recognise themselves as a carer. If you're looking after a husband with cancer or a mother with Alzheimer's or a grown-up son with disabilities, a friend who can't leave the house because of her panic attacks, then that's just what you do. You don't call yourself anything. Here are the 4 features of our Solent Connections project. You can join our online support forum with information, resource links, and a community chat function. You can also access our befriending and signposting via Zoom and telephone. And we plan to set up a weekly peer support group in the next couple of months. We're also able to offer a limited number of one-to-one in-depth sessions with an experienced mental health practitioner. Here are our contact details. And we really look forward to hearing from you. So let me now introduce our first speaker, Claudine Weeks from Health Watch Hampshire. As the communication and engagement lead, Claudine is passionate about sharing information in ways that people will find interesting and accessible. Claudine will talk about the research carried out last summer by Health Watch Hampshire into the views of informal carers about their experiences during lockdown and the kind of support they're looking for. So thank you, Claudine. Let me hand over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Healthwatch Hampshire is sort of the champion or patient champion, I guess, if you like, for patients across Hampshire. So we're here to make sure everyone who uses health and social care services across Hampshire has a voice and has a say in that care and those services. There's also Healthwatch Portsmouth, who I've seen are on the call. Hi, Charlotte. So Healthwatch Portsmouth cover Portsmouth, Hampshire covers everywhere apart from Portsmouth and Southampton. So just to clarify that, but we have the same role of listening to patients. And Healthwatch Portsmouth also carried out very similar research to us as well, and they have a report which picked up very similar issues for carers. So if we move forward to the next slide. So just for background, so we started back in May 2020, which seems a long time ago now. We worked with actually with Portsmouth and Isle of Wight and Southampton Health Watchers to do a general COVID survey looking at how people were accessing health and social care services. And in that, some carers said a few issues that they were having, and there were only a few who replied to that survey, but the issues they raised were quite serious. So we decided we wanted to look into that in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So we've already just talked about who unpaid carers are. So one of the big things I think I agree with Sarah is that people don't realise they're carers. They don't necessarily think of themselves as carers, which then means they don't know the support they're entitled to and they don't know the information they can access, so which came up in the survey. So next slide. So we decided we wanted to look at that in more detail about carers and what was happening. So we got in touch with several carer organisations across Hampshire, and we spoke to them initially and said, what do you think? Do you think this is an issue? Should we go out and ask questions, and what kind of questions should we ask? So we worked actually with the carer groups to create our survey in the first place to make sure we were asking the right questions. And we asked three main things. One, just tell us your experience of being a carer during this time. What was helpful and good, and then what would you like to see in the future? So we wanted to know, what it was like at the moment, and then what could be done to make things better going forward. And in total, we had almost 200 replies from adult carers using email, phone, online survey. And we also worked directly with 10 young carer groups to get their views, which were quite different as well. So we had quite a good response to the survey across the board. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go quickly through some of the key themes that came out in the survey. I've also got some slides in here with sound of carers actually telling their own stories, so hopefully they'll work and then you can hear what they had to say. So some of the key challenges were unable to get a break, obviously, because a lot of the services closed temporarily during lockdown. A lot of people saw an increase in the number of hours they're having to spend caring because they didn't have that support anymore. Things like a school closure and having children at home when trying to then care for elderly relatives at the same time, and problems accessing services that they just couldn't get through to. So those were quite common themes throughout the survey. So I'm not sure if there's sound on that one. Maybe, yeah.
A sense of abandonment was felt as we felt our way on a day-by-day basis, pooling resources with other parents in the same situation through social media and networking. Not once did we receive a phone call from a social worker inquiring about how our family was being affected or if we needed any help. Okay. A sense of abandonment was...
Next one, please. Yeah, these the audio is from two carers who were caring for grown-up disabled children, basically. So they were in their 20s, but they were still living at home and sort of telling their stories. So just sprinkled throughout the presentation. So some of the other challenges people were facing. So a big one came out, which was lack of recognition. So that came down to perhaps having to wait at the GP for an appointment when they had to leave their person at home and they weren't recognised that actually they can't wait around for hours to pick up a prescription or whatever it was they needed to do because they needed to get home. And some of that was that they hadn't actually told their GP they were a carer. So there was kind of a mishmash of things there. And yeah, there were quite a few sort of different issues that came up that were affecting carers. So things like not being able to get deliveries because all the slots were taken, and also finding it very difficult to explain to their person, perhaps who has dementia or learning difficulties or other issues, why all their services stopped and why they couldn't leave the house and why people weren't coming to see them anymore. And that was very stressful and very kind of emotional for a lot of the carers we spoke to, that the person they were caring for just didn't understand what was happening, and that could then affect their behaviour as well and their kind of emotional state, and caused all sorts of issues for both carer and the person being cared for. And another one was that, yeah, they just didn't know where to turn for help, which was quite sad. So next one, please. I think that's backwards.
Sense of abandonment was felt as we felt our way.
Next. There we go. So some of the key themes that came out of the survey with the impact on family life, mental health, employment and financial pressures, because some people suddenly became carers overnight. They'd just been helping out a little bit here and there, but then that person had to shield and needed kind of full-time support, which then put a challenge on the person who maybe before had been going out to work. So there were a lot of things that came up in the survey that perhaps people weren't aware of before. I think there's sound on that one.
He really struggled to understand why his life could become one of being locked inside 24/7. Suddenly he was not seeing loved ones, not going to school or having his daily therapies, and this led to my son to deteriorate mentally and physically. I would see him retreating to his playroom and sitting, putting his face in his hands and gently crying. He kept saying sorry to me over and over again, and it broke my heart that he believed that the reason he was not able to go to school was because he'd done something wrong. He really struggled to...
I think that's the end. I think that's
the pressure that carers are under is immense. I mean, I can just describe it as it was like I felt like I'd got to a point where I felt like I was being submerged in water. And as I got to a point where I couldn't breathe anymore, suddenly I was allowed to come up and I'd get a gasp of air and then I would literally start again. But I was fighting. I was actually fighting for my son. And this was what a lot of people don't even realise you're doing. I couldn't understand why I would be fighting in a situation where it was already a stressful situation. So the pressure that carers are under.
As parents, we were left to care on a daily basis from morning to night with very little help and no income, as self-employed work was not possible.
I think that's the end of that. It's a short one, that one.
As parents, we were left to care.
Yeah, so there's quite powerful stories coming from just a couple of carers that I spoke to personally. The issues that came through with young carers were slightly different, because obviously they were then home from school and having to try and do schoolwork at home and their caring responsibilities on top, not seeing their friends, but also witnessing the pressure on their parents, changing family relationships and things like that. Yeah, so they couldn't get breaks, they couldn't go out, and they were seeing all of the impact that was having on their family. So the next one, I think the next one's just a couple of quotes from some young carers. Next one. So when it came to help, there were quite a few positives. Keeping connected with friends and family, so things like Zoom calls and online events were really valuable and really valued by carers, because it just gave them somewhere to go and somewhere to talk to. Facebook groups that were set up, I think, became quite popular. Help with getting essentials like food and medication, sometimes from voluntary groups or from the pharmacy and the supermarket. Some of those were praised quite highly. Community schemes as well that helped people get prescriptions delivered and things like that were helpful. So there were some really good positive things that came out of it through the new technology, actually. Next one. Things that carers asked for to be better in the future was obviously more access to services that had closed down, and perhaps setting them up in a way that could be socially distanced and safe rather than closing them. Being recognised as a carer by GPs, which is something that we've been working on actually with a few carers groups locally to take that forward. more support, and being aware of what services there are, knowing where to turn when things happen. That was a big one, and again, that's something we've looked at taking forward with the new project. Next one. Yeah, so that was just a couple of things that they said directly. Next one. So we come up from the survey, we produced a report which is all on our website, and we produced a few recommendations from that because of what people said. So if I just jump ahead, I can talk about the projects that we've done as a result. So the first thing we did was access to information was a big issue. Carers thinking there's lots of information out there, but it was all in different places and they didn't really know where to go. So we've created a new carer zone on our website, and it just directs people to other places, so like the Hampshire County Council website, Connect Support website, Carers Together, all the local groups. So we've done like a roadmap, so if people are looking for finance or support groups, they're all very easy to spot and go straight through. And then we've done a directory of all the kind of groups across Hampshire that can help. So we created that, and that is now live. We also created it with carer groups. We got their feedback and asked them what should be included and which links to go to and things like that. Carers assessments was an interesting one. So I think over half the people we interviewed didn't know what a carers assessment was. They'd never heard of it, and they didn't know they were entitled to it, and that it could lead to lots of help and support for them. So we are running a project now to find out how carers assessments, how easy it is to find information about carers assessments, sorry. And we're just sort of testing the websites on the for the council, and then we're going to kind of do a survey back to the council to talk about how easy the information was to find or not, and if there's any improvements needed, or if it's just a case of raising awareness for those as well. I've just launched actually last week our project, the video project with GPs. So we've done an interview with a GP talking about why you need to tell your GP if you're a carer and all the help they can give you, and also with the carer talking about how helpful his GP is. So looking at it from both sides, because that was one of the things a lot of carers said their GPs were helpful when they knew they were a carer, but a lot of the carers hadn't told their GP about their caring responsibilities, which again I think comes back to the thing we said at the beginning. People don't see themselves as carers, they're just looking after their mum or their partner or whatever it might be. But actually GP can give you a lot of support and make flexible allowances if they know you're caring for someone at home. So we've just launched a campaign on social media and the website using the videos to get people to talk to your GP about being a carer. And we're also setting up, and again we've just launched today, an online carers form for East Hampshire. East Hampshire District Council approached us having seen our report and wanted to do something in their area for carers, particularly as part of their wellbeing strategy. So we've just launched that project for East Hampshire today as well. So we were really keen that the survey didn't just end there. We wanted to take things forward and do more projects and help keep that support going. And I'm sure there'll be more to come going forward as well.
So now I'd like to introduce Caroline Haworth, who is from the Hive Portsmouth. And as a carer herself, Caroline recognises the issues many of us face when looking after and feeling responsible for a family member, partner or friend, even if you wouldn't call yourself a carer. In her current role, Caroline helps to support a wider range of charities and community groups based in Portsmouth. She has previously worked for the Portsmouth Carer Centre, particularly with young people looking after someone else experiencing mental ill health. So I'd like to introduce Caroline and pass over to her. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. And can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, my name's Caroline Haworth, and I'm a daughter, but also a carer within that role, and work for the Hive Portsmouth, and I'll talk a little bit later about that. But I'll give you a bit of context about my own situation. My father was diagnosed with vascular dementia about 12 years ago. And obviously what comes with that is some quite challenging, obviously it's a challenging illness. And sadly, my dad was living out of the area and he was living with his wife, my stepmom, and was caring for him. But sadly, she became unwell herself and unfortunately died of breast cancer. So it was then the sort of responsibility of my sister and I to then look after my father. So in terms of assessing his needs, it was appropriate that Dad moved to Portsmouth to be closer to me, and he was moved into a residential home in the city. Again, a lot of assessments around that, just making sure all of his needs were being met, and actually that he, I could provide that good quality support as a daughter to go and see him on a regular basis. And when he first moved in, I was like working full time and seeing him every evening and every day and at weekends, trying to kind of manage some of the guilt you feel about that situation. But actually that is not sustainable in any way, shape or form. But over the time, obviously, you kind of manage it in a way that works for you as a family and you as a daughter. And obviously my sister was coming down from London to also see my father. And through that period of time, offered a lot of support to him, as well as him being in a residential home, but also the challenges of deprivation of liberty, the continuing healthcare assessments, which, never seemed to get any funding. Challenging, obviously, I was a deputy to my father's kind of not estate, but obviously his affairs. So, that was kind of a lot of my time was managing that, as well as, seeing my dad and being that social connection to him and offering that time to go out and be a family, and obviously see his own grandson, and just kind of make sure that the quality of life that he had was as good as it possibly could be, and also those interactions with other residents and being part of that home environment. But forward March 2020, we are the 15th of March was the last time I got to see him, obviously in the care homes. The lockdown came, and then family members were said, no more visiting, that's it. As we all saw the news evolve, it was fairly worrying times. And I remember specifically the following Saturday, I received an email from the care home to say that they had their first case of COVID in the care home. And that actually made it incredibly real to me that actually COVID was in Portsmouth and actually was in the care home. And this situation was now becoming very serious, because actually you've got X amount of vulnerable people living in a very close confinement, and, you've got obviously staff. And also in terms of not being able to see your father, my dad, and offer him that reassurance and say things were going to be okay. But that was always a concern for me and a challenge. But obviously the home were, I think it was challenging, and you could see the news. Everyone saw the news at that time in terms of obviously the impact on care homes, and we saw the figures coming through. And that, for me was hard, because actually you didn't really know what was going on. But as time progressed, obviously we were getting communications from the care home to say, they've got the PPE, and, central government was sending those guidances down to leaders, managers, and things were being put in place. But that was quite a difficult time in the sort of March, April period. So, but during that time, the home managed to sort out their Skype access, which was great, and was able to do Skype calls with my dad on a couple of occasions. I'm not sure doing Skype calls with someone with advanced dementia is that easy, but I got to see his face and he got to hear my voice. But what became apparent was obviously my dad was ended up from March, he was mobilising into a wheelchair. But as time went on, things were deteriorating quite rapidly for him because of that lack of me going and visiting my sister, that stimulation, that keeping, that just, keeping eyes on people, isn't it? And but that obviously changed the situation. So as time went on, obviously we still weren't allowed to visit, but we're getting informed that Dad was deteriorating quite rapidly. And then we got the call at the end of July to say actually Dad was now actually at a stage where he was no longer able to swallow, and this deterioration was happening rapidly. And sadly, we were getting the call to say that we were on now the pathway to the end of life pathway. And the next day we were allowed to actually go and visit. So from the 15th of March, this is now the 1st of August. I'm now allowed to go and see my father, but this is obviously a very difficult time because, this is end of life pathway. So my sister and I have to go, and we're all gowned up, and you're wearing your face masks and your aprons and your gloves and your visor, and to go into a very difficult situation where you've not seen the person you love since March, and now you're about to say probably goodbye to them. So not an easy time. And obviously COVID is, you know, the whole impact of not being able to hug, touch and be with people prior to their, you know, end of life has been challenging for people across the country. So for me, you know, we obviously got to spend, you know, 15 minutes with my father. Not ideal. Not anyone would want that, would they? But, you know, it was those moments, and, you know, I did take my mask off and I did hold my dad's hand. Those are the things that we were told not to do. But quite frankly, you know, this is, you know, we're in a very weird situation through COVID. And then the following evening, the morning, so the following day or the early morning, we got the call to say Dad had passed peacefully in his sleep. Dad did not die of COVID, it was dementia, but I do believe that obviously the way dementia and the restrictions put on people in care homes has certainly accelerated, and people's decline in well-being has certainly been, I believe, and that was the case for my father, definitely. You know, back in March, he was sat in a wheelchair. Obviously, he had got, you know, quite severe dementia, but I think the lack of stimulation and being in his room, and family members not being able to visit, has definitely contributed to that not earlier, but, you know, a death which was much sooner than one would have thought. But within that, you know, the whole COVID thing has been very clinical. And obviously dad was there for 8 years of his life, and part of my life have been visiting there. And also in terms of that, you know, we had to go and collect his stuff, and obviously you couldn't say goodbye to any of the staff because actually, you know, you're not allowed in the property anymore, in the building, and he just sort of handed a box of items which was from his room, and it's kind of like you want to say goodbye and thank you to all those staff there who've worked with him and supported him. But, you know, unfortunately, COVID, that very clear clinicalness was not something that was able to happen. So that it's not all doom and gloom, but, you know, dementia is a really hard one for people, and it's been a long old journey. But COVID, I believe, you know, and that kind of lack of social contact has definitely not been easy, and that very clinicalness in terms of, and I totally recognise the staff are following all the protocols and they've been amazing, but, you know, it's kind of like, you know, we are all human beings at the end of the day. So in terms of that's also been quite difficult. But throughout that process, I've also been caring for my mum, who also, she's unfortunately got cancer too. So within this time, I've had like dual roles, working full time. I've got an 8-year-old. It's been a little bit challenging at times, but my manager and my colleagues have been amazing, and I've obviously been able to work flexibly around the situations that I've been in. So my mum has had numerous hospital trips to the QA. They've been amazing, but I've spent a lot of time in QA car park waiting around, so I can't go into those appointments with her. I know the car park well. And that's been quite interesting. Sadly, she had various admissions to QA and throughout the last year and this year. And, you know, on one occasion, she was informed that, and obviously no visitors, really difficult. On one occasion, she was informed that actually the cancer spread, and, you know, she's in hospital and we can't be there to hold her hand, hug her, you know, all those really kind of things we would all want to do, because actually we're at COVID lockdown and there's no way we can go and visit. That's, you know, for a lot of people I know across the country, that's been incredibly hard. And also the whole thing about the bubble. I'm the main bubble person, and you know, got a sister in London. She hasn't been able to come down until recently. Well, she'll be able to come down this weekend, thank God. But, you know, I'm the main bubble. So it's, you know, and obviously, you know, when you're having chemo and radiotherapy, you've got to be super careful. So it's managing that, as well as, you know, having an 8-year-old homeschooling and bouncing around, plus working. So it's been challenging. But also, you know, I recognise as carers, you have to take that time for yourself. There's only certain limitations, And for me, you know, it has reached points in the last 18 months. I'm like, geez, I can't really take much more. But actually what I've done is, you know, spoken to people, you know, using those different resources that are out there, you know, go walking, clear your head, and actually recognize that actually, you know, take that time for yourself and do something which is important for your well-being. So as I talk on to that, so I work for the Hive Portsmouth, and we provide within my role, I support lots of different charities in the city. And part of that is around signposting to different organisations across Portsmouth. So I'll just put a little slide up now, if I can share my screen. One moment.
While you're sorting that out, I'd just like to say thank you so much for sharing that really touching personal story. Really illustrates the difficulties that people like yourself are going through during this time.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, and I don't underestimate, you know, across the country, you know, I've worked at the Carer Centre. I'm passionate about carers and the role we all play within that. And, you know, like you talked about earlier, none of us really see ourselves as carers, and it's just something that we do. But I do believe that, you know, they are underthought of at times, and you know, I'm really passionate about carers and making sure people do look after themselves and have access to services that can enhance their lives and improve the lives of the people that they care for, because, you know, it's not easy. So in terms of the Hive Portsmouth, we do have a directory of services on our website, which I'll take you to. Hopefully it'll work, and then I can just kind of, oh yeah, that ain't gonna work. Right, let's have a little look. So we take you back one moment. I've got it open up here. So can you? Oh, let me share that screen. Oh, can you see that one? No, can you see the Hive directory?
Nothing's happening yet. Nothing's happening yet. No.
Not that one. Right. Can you see that one? Hive directory?
Something's trying to happen. Yes. That's
awesome.
It. Lovely.
Okay, the link doesn't work in my presentation, but anyway. So the Hive Portsmouth has a website, and if you just go, and it's googlehiveportsmouth.org. And we've got a Hive directory on there, and there are lots of different organisations which are registered or not even registered. They're on there. So you just go through the search engine and say, what am I looking for? So if we said support for carers, then you just press support for carers and then go for the search, and then it will create a list of different organisations out there supporting carers. So but what I would say is, in terms of information on those services, obviously what I would go and double check what the offer is currently, because obviously with COVID that may be changing, just in terms of that, if it's no longer Zoom or if it's more one-to-one organisations. So like obviously big one where I used to work, Portsmouth Carer Centre, provides significant support in the city for signposting. Again, the carers assessment can be part of that process. So where an assessment worker would look at your whole caring role and then signpost to different organisations. And within the Carer Centre as well, they've got obviously direct links to organisations like adult social care, OTs, and secondary mental health services and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's a link in the city that people should go to. Again, organisations like Rebound, a carers support group for those who are supporting someone addiction or alcohol issues. Remind is a Solent mind service in the city, which are supporting people with dementia. Again, Society St James, again, those affected by drug and alcohol. But I'll go back to the slides. One moment. Can everyone see that one now? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so like I've talked about there. So on the Hive, if you were to support for groups and bereavement support, we've been working quite closely with the Rowans as well. And there's quite an extensive list of bereavement support in the city as well. talked about the Portsmouth Carer Centre, but yeah, down in Orchard Road, and they're doing, I believe, appointment-based support and lots of signposting. They've also got a great cookery, carers respite, which I think is happening down at the community allotments, which is great. And so other organisations in the city, such as Talking Change, and obviously Rowan's, as we talked about there, I've got some great support for people who are caring for somebody with a life-limiting illness. And they've got the Living Well project. Once again, I think that's all on Zoom at the moment, but you know, with restrictions easing, we hope hopefully we can do a bit more face-to-face. Again, you know, in a caring role, as we know, your situation might change in terms of finances or your, you know, employment. So organisations such as Citizens Advice Portsmouth or Advice Portsmouth from the U Trust are able to provide that kind of holistic look at all those issues, and you know, people accessing those care entitlements, which are really important. Again, for some emotional support, Solent Mind, Positive Minds. Again, something I've accessed this year is telecare. Great peace of mind. Actually, the little wristband, which is a great support for carers if your loved one might be at risk of falling or setting it off all the time. But telecare is a good resource to use. Again, occupational therapy, that'd be through Adult Social Care, the City Council. But again, great to do those assessments in the home and put those adaptations in the house home if possible. Again, you know, well, as we all know, as people and people in stressful situations, some of the things that, you know, are available to people is, you know, the getting out, doing some exercise, walking. You know, a lot of the Facebook groups. Stand Up is a parent carer support group who are run in the city, and they've got a really active Facebook page where they provide a lot of peer support and information. Once again, you know, people getting out and about, and you know, and for many carers, they can't actually go out or leave the house. So even if it's listening to a podcast, reading, or you know, having that time or a couple of moments in the garden. But yeah, so you know, please do look at our Hive website and our directory of services. We also have an events page which is just about to launch, which has organisations promoting quite a few of their activities, and hopefully as we ease out of lockdown we can do a bit more face to face, because I think that's what people are after. But if you've got any questions, or please come back to me and I'll share the slides with Sarah, and then we can you know, get you that information to you. I think that's it from me. Stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. That was really in depth, and a great bit of signposting there. So I'm just going to open up the chat and see what kind of questions we might have in here. And I can see that Susan from the Isle of Wight, school nurse, was asking about the young carer survey, and I believe that's been answered in the chat, to say that the report was shared with Hampshire Children's Health and Care Services too. But Caroline, this was a question directed to you. I wonder, is there anything more that you wanted to say about that?
I was too busy looking at the chat and I totally wasn't concentrating. Was that?
That's okay. I was just mentioning the question that you answered here from Susan about the outcome of the survey for young carers. And I know you've answered it here, but I just wondered if there was anything extra that you wanted to say, and for the recording.
I think that was me rather than Caroline.
Oh,
right.
Apologies. I'm trying to make sense of the chat from my tablet. So we've been having major IT issues.
I took it because I mentioned that we surveyed young carers as part of our work, so I took it that was for me, and it was just to say that all the responses from the young carers are included in our final report, and that report was shared with Hampshire Council's adult and children's health and care services teams, and they both responded actually to it, which all the responses are on our website as well. But yeah, we included all the views from the young carers in that report as well.
Fabulous.
Oh, hi, Claudine. So thank you for answering that. It's Susan Gale. I'm one of the school nurses on the Isle of Wight. It wasn't really where you shared it. It was actually the result. I was just staggered that you actually got responses during COVID, a survey response, and sort of high five to you to actually, because as a school nurse, I do come across young carers quite a lot, and at the moment on the Isle of Wight there's nothing. So to actually have a survey and actually get responses is incredible. But I just wanted to check, to clarify with you, that I only got 4 of the things that the young carers said on the things, rather than having to go back on. I know it's recorded and everything, and you can get sent things, but invariably I don't pick it up because I only work 3 days a week. So one of the things that from what I heard, the young carers were saying that was problems engaging with schoolwork, digital exhaustion, increasing young carers' responsibility, and then it sort of went off. I've put online carers forum. I've just scribbled there, so it doesn't make sense, my notes. So what was the other result from the young carers? Can you just go back over that again? Sorry.
Yeah. I think the other one from that was changes in their family. So they were not able to go out and see their friends, so they couldn't get a break from their own caring. But also they were witnessing, so if they were a sibling in a family with, perhaps a disabled sibling, they were seeing the stress that was putting on their parents of trying to cope with everything, and perhaps particularly if their parents were facing financial problems as well, not unable to work, and with both of them not at school, they were witnessing a lot of stress at home. I think that was the other one, as well as.
So there was 5. There's 5 then.
Yeah.
The young carers from your young care. There's 5. Okay.
And in terms of the survey, what we did with the young carers, there's a Hampshire Young Carers Association. So we approached them to talk to young carers for us, and we created a slightly different approach with questions designed specifically for the young people. And it was through those groups who were doing Zooms and things with young carers that we got those views back.
So it wasn't a simple little question and answer thing that they filled in as choices. It was just sort of an overall thing that you gathered from information from Zooms.
Yeah.
So were any of the Isle of Wight young carers asked, just out of interest?
I think that might be one. I know Charlotte's got a hand up. That might be one for Healthwatch Portsmouth, because I know they've done a survey as well, and they might have had more from that area, I'm guessing.
I don't know, because I don't even know if the Young Carers Association is actually functioning on the Isle of Wight anymore.
Okay. Well,
seriously, because the finances stopped, and they withdrew. The council just stopped it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we've got nothing. We've got very little. All those things that you said in Portsmouth. None of that happens on the Isle of Wight. So
yeah, I might be able to help. Sorry.
Yeah. Apologies. I was just saying it sounds like there's a big gap there on the Isle of Wight. Sorry,
yeah,
Claudine.
So we did basically an identical survey to Claudine. She kind of helped develop it all, and we just nicked it really. But we wanted to look at Portsmouth as a whole. That did go out to the Isle of Wight as well. So we had very, very similar responses. The biggest one for us was, again, breastfeeds being stopped. The bubbles weren't clearly defined. So you'd normally have your mum come over to give you a break from your caring, but then they didn't want to get the person they're caring for vulnerable to other people coming in the house, and it just kind of spiraled. So we produce recommendations as well, again looking at the GPs, trying to get GPs to identify carers, because if you're caring for someone and you've been put in hospital, that person is now on their own. We did contact young carers, mainly in Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. We were quite strict. We had to go on from PO2 to PO6. And when we did the survey, we asked people for the first line of their postcode and their demographics, so their age. So we did get a lot of young people, but mainly just Portsmouth, not the Isle of Wight.
No. Did you get any from the Isle of Wight? Was it? No. That's what I suspected, actually.
Yeah, but
it's because the Isle of Wight hasn't got a functioning young carers group for you to take
to go to.
Yeah, so it's a
Definitely.
real big need now, really. Genuinely, people are on their knees, like you're saying. It's sort of really,
Absolutely, and they are still a part of Hampshire, and we do need to connect. So I'm
Please.
meeting with Portsmouth Carers Centre on Wednesday, and we are teaming up with Alzheimer's UK because they've recently done a report, and we've got similar recommendations. But that is definitely a big one I want to kind of ask.
Start with
Wednesday.
the young people first, please.
Yes, absolutely.
Please. I don't want to prioritise, but really, everyone is now. Because I was redeployed, so I do understand how desperate it is for the older generation. But the young generation, my gut feeling is now, it was similar to when after the Second World War, how emotionally and how young people have been treated. It's like when they were sent away to the country to avoid the bombing. It's the same thing during COVID experience, and so the young carers are really, really, really,
absolutely
desperate.
And I think the stuff you go through as a child, it definitely impacts your adult life, and if you've got all this extra
and so
pressure,
unless we get that back in, we can't
and there's going to be consequences. So what I'll have a chat with Carer Centre in Portsmouth on Wednesday. I'll bring that up, and we'll try and do some investigating of what's happened on the Isle of Wight and how we can
I just interject? My team lead for the school nurse team is someone called Alison Price on the Isle of Wight. If you can, because I'm only a band 5, and I just happen to have the opportunity to do this training. So thank you all for doing it. But if you can direct anything about young carers specifically to my team lead, that would be wonderful.
Susan, if you can just pop the contact in, like, email address and whatnot in the chat, then I can.
So if I put mine and then
and we go through that way.
There is a Health Watch Isle of Wight as well, so I'll make sure the colleagues there are aware of that issue as well, in case there's anything they can follow up.
Oh right, okay, thank you, ladies. I'm feeling a lot better now. It's the first time I've done this kind of thing. It's because I've had a chance to come into the office, so thank you.
I think with the Health Watchers, we all work together as much as we can, and if we in Portsmouth can't do something, Hampshire could potentially pick it up, or Isle of Wight. So because we've got them connections, we can speak to the colleagues and just try and but we'll keep you updated and let you know how we get on.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that conversation, and thank you, Charlotte, for bringing that information into the group today. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring to the session today? Any questions for our speakers, or anything else that to kind of bring into the session? You can always put that in the chat, or feel free to put your hand up if you'd rather speak. Okay. Yep, I can see Valerie. You're on mute still at the moment. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. As chairman of Parkinson's UK in Fareham District, we have struggled to stay in contact with all our members and their family carers throughout the pandemic. So we've got a fairly clear picture, I think, of what's actually happened. Sorry, the dog's wanting to join in now. And I think that one of the huge issues that we have had is with the rapid deterioration of a lot of our people, because they haven't been medically and professionally monitored as often as they would be outside the pandemic, with the result that the carers are almost running to catch up, and in lots of cases finding it very difficult to do so. And so we have been aware of the fact that we've had to support our carers by letting them talk through the situations they're in by phone. And I think the other huge problem that we have had, and we worry about hugely, is phone consultations for our members who find it very, very difficult to communicate anyway, a lot of them. And that again has deteriorated over the year. And the what's worrying us slightly is the gentle suggestion that's coming through from the professionals that a lot of these consultations will stay on phone or online. We have a lot of people who aren't online, and those who naturally have phones actually find them very difficult to use. And so one of the things that our carers are worrying about is what's going to happen when we come out of all this, and whether they are, normal service is going to be resumed, or whether they are still going to be struggling with trying to explain what's happening with the deterioration by phone without the professional actually seeing the patient.
There's actually been a direction that's come out, I think it was on Friday, that all GPs now have to offer face-to-face wherever possible. It's something that we're going to, as Health Watch, we're going to be keeping an eye on, because access to care is, and going forward, coming out of the pandemic, is a big issue. And it's something actually all the Health Watches across the South are going to be working together on as a project.
It might be helpful to Health Watch to realise that most Parkinson's patients hardly see their GPs. Their GPs have very little input in their care. For historic reasons, we have Parkinson's disease nurse specialists and the consultants, and they are the ones who are looking at the moment to hang on to the telephone.
Oh, okay.
So just to mention that part of our project that we're launching for Solent Connections will have the availability for several sessions, one-to-one. They're not in person, but they are face-to-face over Zoom. Yeah. So we are able to offer some level of
but I do repeat what I've just said about people not having access. When we met face-to-face every month on the first Monday of the month, we could expect 80 to 100 people at our coffee morning. We have been holding fortnightly Zoom meetings, and if we get 20, we've done well. So there's an awful lot of people out there, who are less supported and who we are beginning to worry about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting a few things coming through to me in the private chat here. Charlotte's posted a guidance page. I wonder if, Charlotte, if you could just redirect that to everybody, because I think that's just come through just to me.
Really?
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Guidance says so step 3, where the restrictions are eased today, and there's specifically about GPs. On there is a letter that we've received, and it talks solely about half of all generic practice appointments during the pandemic have been delivered in person. GPs must all ensure they are offering face-to-face appointments, and it goes on. So if you want to hear any more about that, this is what we've received to be able to share, which might help, Valerie.
Thank you. But we still have this problem of very little input from GPs.
Yes, yeah. There's certainly cracks appearing, and there was cracks in our service before the pandemic, and it's certainly made them
got
bigger.
wider. They've got wider.
Yeah. So, and really, that's our main kind of reasons for bringing in this event today. And we welcome you all to have come here today with us and to share this and to be able to talk about some of these problems and highlight this within our community. And we feel like that is really, really important. So I'd like to just kind of thank everyone that's here tonight, and everyone that shared and brought something to the event, and in particular our speakers, Caroline, who brought a very touching personal story, and Claudine as well, who raised some recordings of some personal stories, and both who shared some wonderful signposting, and Charlotte as well, who's introduced a few things to us tonight at the end here. Thank you so much, everyone. The only other thing to just say is that if anyone is interested in our project, the Solent Connections, and you want to know more information, please just let us know in any way that's easiest for you. That can be by email, by phone, via the Facebook Messenger. Our details are all on slide 3 if you're watching the recording, and we'll also post it in the title of the recording as well. So thanks again for everyone who's been involved. Carolyn Barber, who actually wrote my speech today and organised this event, who has been lurking in the background doing the slides because she's had a bit of a sore throat today. But thank you so much, Carolyn, for putting all this together. It's been wonderful. And everyone for being here and joining us today. Thank you. So I'm going to end the meeting.